had it here.
All right,
We are now streaming.
we are.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Today is webinar number 3 for the budget workshops. It is, what is today? Today's Tuesday, April 7th. And can I please have today's attendance?
Sure. Ms. Durgan,
Here.
Mrs. Giftos. I saw her there.
You're on mute, Alicia.
Yes.
Dr. Gill. Ms. Casalonis.
Here.
Ms. Layton.
Here.
Ms. Seither.
Here.
Mrs. Turner.
Here.
And Ms. Caldwell and Mr. Bennett are working on schoolwork.
Right. And if you could join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag of the United States of America,
Republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So welcome, everybody. We are here this afternoon, and to just remind everybody, we're working on our FY21 budget review, and this is being recorded. And in addition to that, I think people know the norms. Just like to remind people who are presenting, you have roughly 12 to 15 minutes. Diane is our timekeeper, and certainly if you need more time, we'll work that out so that you can finish your presentation. So we're going to transportation.
All right. Well, I am going to present the transportation budget this afternoon. So just as a reminder, in terms of transportation, we literally travel over 450,000 miles a year. And we're very fortunate that we have the town that services our fleet of buses right here in district. In looking at what we currently have online for vehicles, we have 30 buses and 5 minivans now on board. And we also have 1 truck that helps to deliver lunches. Our drivers do so much above and beyond, just in addition to driving for us on a day-to-day basis. They do adopt a family. They work with us to support the backpack program. Currently, while we are in this virtual learning mode, we are working with the bus drivers who are delivering food for us on a regular basis, as well as instructional materials to students who need those delivered as well. And this year, we have trained 2 more drivers for a CDL license. We are constantly looking to bring new folks on board, and will provide them with that training if they make an agreement with us. In terms of our return on our investments, we were very fortunate this year to bring on a half-time office support position to the transportation department. And this has been an added value for us as a district. After school can be a little bit of a hairy time for folks, especially if a child doesn't show up at their bus stop at a certain time, or buses are running late, or things such as that. And having an office support person right at the bus garage has allowed us to really make more connections with parents in real time, and have that communication happen as quickly as possible. We're also really excited this year to share that we have significantly decreased our need to use custom coach buses to cover day-to-day transportation needs. And so we have experienced a lot of savings this year by being able to do more of our day-to-day business using our own drivers and vehicles. And if we look ahead to this year's budget, the budget really is more of just a maintenance request. And so again, our budget proposal is going to allow us to continue to provide safe and secure transportation for kiddos, keep our 2-tier bus schedule intact, and also continue the process for hiring and training new drivers so that we're always making sure that we have the personnel that we need on staff. And through the capital budget, as we have an ongoing replacement schedule, this year we'll be looking to replace 3 aging buses and 1 of our passenger vans, and also looking to upgrade our camera systems on older buses that may not have the most up-to-date camera systems. Those camera systems prove helpful to us on a regular basis. And so, you know, those are things that are definite needs for us at this time. And that's what I have for transportation. So pretty straightforward in terms of where we are and what our ask is to continue to allow us to provide that service to students in our district.
Thank you, Diane. Any
Welcome.
questions for Diane from the board or the public? Okay, I don't see any questions. We'll carry on.
Great, thank you.
Facilities and maintenance. Todd, you're on.
Okay. Thank you for giving us the time here. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can read. So our budget allows us to continue to maintain safe and healthy learning environments for our students and staff, and to maintain the school buildings to a standard where they're preserved for a long time to come. Everyone always asks how many years I hope a building to last, and you know, the ideal answer would be forever, and we all know that that's very difficult to do. But our 3 main schools on the main campus are long-term 70-year buildings. Our K-2 schools, as you know, continue to be a topic of discussion. So I'll talk about our operational costs and what our general budget funds. We've been allowed to do some of the things here that are starred, and I don't need to read them verbatim because you can all read. I am constantly focusing on efficiency. So lighting and HVAC are 2 of the big opportunities for that, along with water usage. A large part of my budget is made up of utilities. So we're always looking for opportunities to save there. As you know, we completed the parking lot construction at 8 Corners, adding 34 spaces. And we are going to continue to grow at 8 Corners and Pleasant Hill this year. You also know from our meetings, and Sandy from the nauseatingly long lists of signatures, that we've joined the Energy Consortium to save us more money that we will begin to see in late next year. We've already started to see some savings with the hydroelectric savings that are in operation already. We operate a very lean group, only 4 maintenance people on the staff. By the end of next year, we'll be up to over 690,000 square feet of building space, with the added 6 portable classrooms once Pleasant Hill is completed. So it's a lot of space and a lot of running around. We get our steps in. No worries about fitness here. Okay, Kate, can we scroll to the next slide? Okay. As you know, big topic of conversations and many meetings this year have focused on long-range planning as our enrollment continues to grow. So we're dealing with space crunches and have been for many years. And we're also continuing to deal with the aging infrastructure of the schools. HVAC and building envelope, which means the sort of the shell, the protective shell, windows, doors, roof, walls, of the schools, those are the most expensive areas that we keep maintained. And then we deal programmatically with, in many cases, inadequate instructional spaces. So we're constantly retrofitting either smaller offices or classrooms, dicing them up, making them more appropriate for specialized instruction or behavioral modifications, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a constant challenge. Many times we piecemeal things together and make do. And that's what we've sort of been successful at. And it's sort of a blessing and a curse, because if we're successful at it, then people keep asking, well, why don't we just keep doing it that way? And the answer is, it's not what is best for kids. And that's what we're all about. So we're looking at new ways to do things better. And we often run up against space. So this long range planning, as we've noted at the bottom here, has impacts to both operating my regular operational budget as well as my capital budget. In differentiating between the two, operating budgets are mostly the utilities I talked about and staffing for custodians. We have 30 custodians and 4 maintenance people and myself and 2 others in the office that help keep things going. One of the things I like to mention, even though, and you all know it, but I think it often gets overlooked, is the buildings are not just for school. They are community buildings that are used for everything from childcare and summer programs, for community services. They're all our kids, as well as the special learning programs that we have during the summers. So the biggest challenge for me from a strictly operational standpoint is getting everything done in terms of repairs and maintenance in these tiny little slivers of time where you can squeeze something in. So even though we have been shut down for the past 3 weeks, stuff is getting done. We've had gym floors refinished. There's a big roofing job going on at the high school right now where they're all outside on the roof doing stuff that was scheduled to be done last summer, but due to time constraints, it didn't get done. So we're doing it now. So we keep operating whenever we can. Next slide, Kate, please.
Todd, before you move that slide, for the benefit of those at home, can you define HVAC? Because I use that abbreviation.
Yes, thank you. I speak in heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So at our 3 elementary schools, we're on an oil heat system with 28-year-old boilers. 5 of the 6 are 28 years old, original to the renovation in 92, 93 era. And on the main campus, we're all on natural gas, and the boilers there are basically the age of the building. We're getting 24 years old at the middle school, 15 years old at the high school from the renovation time, and 6 years old at Wentworth. But that's also a geothermally heated and cooled building. So we do have boilers for hot water, but that's when we talk about heating, ventilation, air conditioning, we're talking about the boiler heating and heating systems with heat pumps at both middle school and Wentworth, and large air handling units to move the air around and give fresh air to people. So it's the largest mechanical operation and expense of our budget from an operating contracted services standpoint. Oh boy, this got really small. Sorry for the glasses again. Capital improvements, you've all heard me say this about what the state recommends you spend to keep your buildings updated and maintained at an appropriate level. And they recommend that we spend 2% of the total value of our buildings, our physical plant. And the last assessment we had done, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was 2015, right after Wentworth opened, I believe. And they valued it at 150 million. And I think that is certainly an insured value. Replacement value would be probably 3 times that number. If we had to rebuild all of our schools at once, it would be a very large number. So at this level, though, the 150 million, $3 million would be recommended for an annual CIP budget. This year's request is 2.3 million, a little over 2.3 million, and includes things that we've included every year along the way for the most part. But the building envelope I talked to you about, and we've talked about it as the building shell, the roof, walls, floors, windows, doors, skylights, as well as the heating and ventilation and AC system. Mechanical is related to that. I also include plumbing, electrical, and lighting. And security has become a huge expense ever since really Columbine and Sandy Hook. But those are the big issues that we talk about on a daily basis for keeping kids and staff safe while they're at school and keeping our buildings secured when no one's at those schools. The equipment is something that we rely on daily to make sure we can keep the buildings maintained. Vehicles, we have several trucks in our maintenance fleet. We buy furniture constantly, as sometimes it's to replace broken furniture and sometimes it's adding furnishings for the new classrooms, for example. Site improvements, you witnessed the expense of nearly $250,000 for a parking lot at 8 Corners last year. And the facility support equipment is really, well, you can see a picture of a tractor there we use to remove snow, custodial equipment to clean floors. Those machines they use to clean floors can range in price from $7,000 to $10,000 to $15,000, depending on the size of it and what it does. So we hope to get several years of use. That tractor, for example, would be a 15-year item, but a floor machine might be a 7 or 8 year item, just depending on how much use it gets. All of our equipment actually is maintained. Also, we have a PM program for all of our floor machines through our custodial supply vendor, and Public Works maintains our trucks and tractors and equipment like that. And then any specialized equipment like forklift, scissor lifts, aerial lifts is maintained by the company whom we bought them from. So we do try to take care of it and make it last longer than the budget tells us to replace it at. For example, the truck replacement time frame in the town is 10 years. We typically push our vehicles a little longer than that in terms of years, just because they drive around town only, so they don't get the mileage that the buses get, for example. So we can push them a few extra years. Classroom space, as you know, additional modular classrooms, 8 Corners and Pleasant Hill are the projects for this year. And we're working with Sue Ketch at the high school to talk about additional space for her very successful STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, and math. She has no classroom for that specialized class. So her teacher is currently pushing several carts of equipment around to multiple spaces that she has shared. And we've identified an area at the high school where a renovation could take place. It would cost a lot of money, but given the success of the program and not having a compromised space for her STEM teacher, we're looking at that. It would displace, and I mentioned this in my State of the Facilities address last spring, it would displace some of my equipment. And so it would cause an additional expense of me finding some storage or building a storage garage or finding some storage space for the equipment like that tractor that's in there right now. Anything else? Kate, next slide. Is there another slide for me? Nope. Well, yes, I guess that's more for.
This is kind of a tag team between me and Todd, because this covers all of the capital projects. And of course, the bulk of that falls into Todd's section and under Todd's purview. But there are also in the capital projects section, there's a technology piece where Dawn has worked to identify the costs for both regular equipment replacement. I think you might remember he talked a little bit yesterday about the multi-program MLTI, the state laptop initiative. and how we don't really know what kind of funding we're going to have for equipment replacement at the middle school next year. So this is in the capital budget. That's where a portion of that cost resides for the coming year. And hopefully we'll get an offset of some kind from the state. And then the other piece that is in the capital improvements is the transportation budget. And we have a 3 buses a year cycle. As Diane mentioned a minute ago, we're looking to replace one of our minivans. We've been relying on small vans, regular passenger vans, like anybody might drive, to transport 1 or 2 children at a time that are going to particularly special out of district schools, or going someplace where we really only need 1 driver and a passenger or 2. And that's given us a lot of flexibility. And Diane already spoke to the security cameras.
I would just add that the capital improvements for facilities are really for larger scale repair and replacement projects. We do have money in our operating budgets for the day-to-day supplies, and each school has a contracted services line for, the such and so drain is clogged and you have to call in a plumber, or an air handler went down and you have to call a technician. That's more in our operating budget. These CIP project dollars are for larger, longer projects that take a longer period of time. And frankly, as you know, some of them are in response to the growth of our community and some of our programmatic change needs, like the STEM program, for example, at the high school. It's a program that we start at Wentworth, and they have it all the way through the middle school. And then when they get to the high school, it wasn't there. So when we added the teacher, many people might say, why did you add a teacher if you didn't have a space? But it's a classic chicken and egg. We added the teacher. The program has been vastly successful, and the space is inadequate now. So we're asking for capital dollars to make that space available.
I think before we do questions, if you don't mind, Sandy, I was thinking about folks asking about where can they find some resources. And it occurred to me that I could point out that in our agenda that we're using, which is on our website right now, this is the agenda that's posted for all 3 of these school board workshops on the regular school board meeting page. And at the top of this agenda are linked in the budget book that we've been talking about. The page numbers are on the slides. There's a detailed worksheet about the school capital budget. So there's a lot more information in there about capital projects and equipment, and some other materials that are here if folks want to take a deeper look into that.
And I think too, Kate, to credit you, because you're the keeper of all things spreadsheet. But Kate and I sit together a couple times a year and update our 5-year capital project sheet, so that we're not just coming up with this stuff once a year. We have an ongoing list of projects, and we forecast out what we're going to be needing. And as each year comes along, we might end up modifying an ask, because say the cost of putting in a new roof in 2020 is X, but we don't slate it for 5 more years. The cost of roofing materials might go up, so we might have to modify that. But it's all based on our preventive maintenance programs that we have, and we make predictions of useful life of a product or a piece of equipment, and therefore we schedule for it to be replaced. So that's also a spreadsheet that might be worth looking at from a longer term standpoint.
Yeah, I think the 5-year plan is actually on another tab in that sheet that's linked in. I will say Todd's reminded me again that this is a budget that's been being put out, the capital budget, just like everything else that we're talking about today and in these past few days, It's the budget proposal from the leadership team for first reading. And in a couple of areas on the capital budget, if you're reading in the budget book, the little narrative that explains what all these projects are, you'll notice that it says in a couple of places that this number, this price tag that we've put out there is an estimate pending the receipt of actual quotes. So there's a number of items where between first reading and second reading, the leadership team and the school board finance committee and the school board as a whole will be revisiting those numbers and making sure that we have the accurate amounts in there. So these are items in motion in much the same way that we talk about in the operating budget.
Questions, wonderings?
Actually, I have,
Oh, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to ask, I'm remembering last year, didn't we buy one new van last year, one new minivan? And so this would be a replacement for one of the vans we had before. This isn't related to the one we bought last year, right? Just for anyone at home that's remembering that like I am.
Yeah, last year's, we had sort of an emergency need arise, and what we ended up purchasing was a wheelchair van from Mobility Works, which was a really awesome addition to the fleet. But we already had, I believe did we say 5 passenger vans, which are just conventional vans that anyone would drive. They're not adapted at all. And the oldest of those is about 10 years old and has quite a few miles on it and is due to be replaced. So you're right, it's a different vehicle.
Okay, that actually helps because I hadn't thought of that. So this is a van that's just a smaller vehicle, a bunch of seats. This isn't a special access van like the one we purchased last year.
No, most of what we call vans are just regular passenger vans like anybody could drive. So they don't require a CDL license, which actually gives us some flexibility. That's kind of a cool thing. But they also allow us to much more economically transport 2 or 3 children or 1 child, where you don't really need an 84 passenger bus to do that work.
Right. Thank you.
Any other wonderings or questions?
I had a question. Todd, do facilities see any revenue from community services using the spaces for aftercare and summer camp?
The answer to that is yes, and I think Kate is the best person to answer how much we get and for what spaces. But yes, they do pay us a rent. I'm not sure if it's collected monthly or journally transferred. I don't know. Kate, I'll defer to you on how the money.
Yeah, I'm sort of flipping into my book here and looking at numbers, but it's not considered revenue for the facilities department specifically, but the revenue that we receive from community services is folded into our overall non-tax revenues picture in the general fund budget. So it goes right in there with subsidy and other kinds of fees as an offsetting revenue to our general fund budget. So if you were to look in the budget book in the beginning where we have those summary sheets, one of the pages is the general fund operating budget revenue summary, and we have rental of the facilities. So that would be if an outside group decided that they wanted to come in and rent a facility. And then we also have community services daycare as a budget revenue amount. And we also have community services transportation, because during summer rec and sometimes over the school vacations, they will employ our school drivers to take kids to, let's say, Canterbury Lake or someplace exciting for those programs. And then they pay us for the cost of the drivers and the mileage on the vehicles.
I have a question. I'm just wondering, now that our K2 is in particular is buildings are getting to the point where we're at critical mass and with overcrowding and the age of the buildings, the fact that they're not secure and the way they should be. And we've been proceeding with the building steering committee, but not knowing how that's going to turn out. Is there any money in the budget to address any of those issues in the interim?
Other than adding the portables, I would say no. But Kate, you might have a different response.
Well, I think one of the things we've been talking about quite a bit since we've been hearing from the building steering committee and that process moving forward is what kind of funding will we need to do the planning process that would lead up to a building construction project. And there's a little bit of money in the current proposal for that, but that's something that we don't really have solid numbers on yet. And I believe that's something that the board's going to be addressing in the next few weeks. And so that would be a number, I think, that would shift between first and second reading.
But do we have any money, for example, to address the safety issues or, the code issues? I mean, all of these looming issues that we've discussed, the one entrance, one exit, is there any way to fix those concerns if the work is not approved for renovation or consolidation?
So I guess I'm not entirely certain I'm understanding the question properly, but we do have safety and security money. Security and access management is a label on the budget, and we the budget account. But I'm not sure that is earmarked for. Did you say like single access? Are you thinking like the middle school or?
Well, I mean, I guess I just wonder what we do if the new building fails. I mean, how do we plan for that? I mean, and have we allocated money for those issues? I mean, it just feels as though people don't understand how it's either going to be 10 times more money, over the long run, or it's going to be a lot of money now. And do we have the ability to ask for some of that money now in the event that people don't recognize the issue and the new school is not approved?
The middle school notwithstanding, because that's separate from primary schools, obviously. But I think we've been in a little bit of a holding pattern there, Alicia, just because we didn't want to sort of do the proverbial double dip and ask for, a large bonded amount of money to build whatever or renovate our K2s, while simultaneously asking for significant capital dollars to address the issues that maybe we wouldn't address if we were going to be leaving the use of those buildings. So in terms of anything that's glaringly unsafe, I would say we have operational dollars and some capital dollars from a security standpoint to address those. Aside from the one way in, one way out at the middle school, which is going to be a lot more money than just something out of our operational budget. That's going to be construction of a new road and traffic pattern and so forth. That's going to be a fairly significant lift, I think. But Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've sort of been intentionally holding off on large capital expenditures at the K2s while we wait to see what is in store for those schools' futures. Is that correct?
I would agree with that, and I would emphasize what Todd said, is that we're not allowing things to become unsafe. We're not allowing the walls to crumble, and we're really we're trying to find that fine line between maintaining the buildings we have, knowing that we're going to need to occupy them even if we do get a new building in the future. For the kids that are coming to school today, we need it to be safe and healthy and a good learning environment as best we can. But Todd's right, we wouldn't have have on our radar any major projects affecting the K-2 schools until we really know what our direction and timeline are for potential replacement of those schools. I think, Nick might even be able to speak to the fact that we've been having a number of conversations in long-range planning about just that and the what if. And, if the referendum passes and we're able to get a new building, what's the timeline for that look like? And what do we do in the meantime? And then if we don't have a successful referendum and the replacement K2 building is pushed out, then what does that look like? What are the responses to that problem? How do we keep things moving forward?
Yeah, I would just to kind of add on to that a little bit. It has been our kind of, we keep coming back to this idea of contingency planning and long range planning. In other words, what do things look like if we can't do anything? Even if a new school was the shovels in the ground tomorrow, we're not in that new school for 5 years. So there's some contingency planning that has to happen anyway. And it sounds like is happening at different places across the district. One of the struggles that the committee has had is trying to figure out exactly what our role is in that. And I'm kind of starting to understand that it's more our job to kind of get the different stakeholders together and assemble all that information so that it's digestible, not just to the board, but also to the public. And I think that given what's going on right now in our economy, it would be prudent for that group. And I've talked to some members of the committee already about this a little bit, for our next meeting to basically say, what does longer term contingency planning look like, which is kind of a juxtaposition of terms, but what does that look like if we can't build a new school, if that's what happens, and what do things look like 7 years down the road as opposed to 5? So that's what long range planning wants to do. And I think that's what I would like to do at our next meeting, because we kind of keep bouncing, as Kate said, back and forth between talking about, well, what does phase levels look like at this new school when we build it? Oh, but what if we can't build a new school? What does that look like? So we've kind of done this seesaw. And I think we really need to invest in some contingency planning, because with or without a new school, we've got at least 5 years of it to deal with.
I think Alicia makes a really good point that you can't just do nothing, right? You can't say, oh, well, we'll let the schools continue to be inadequate. We'll let them get run down and we'll let them, tumble to the ground because we're waiting to do something that we might do somewhere down the road. And there has to be funding to keep things moving forward. And I think Todd sort of explained that well, that we've got enough to keep things comfortable and safe, and all of the basics will be there until we're ready to move forward, but we're not doing anything more elaborate than that at this point until we get some further guidance.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Other questions?
I have a question. Kate, can you tell me where in the budget book or what I should be looking at if I want to look at this year's CIP budget compared to last year's?
Well, that's a really good point. I don't think we have anything compared to last year's except gross numbers, and they are on this fancy blue and green sheet, which I know you have one of those. Yeah. April and I are paper people. The last 2 pages of that document are the 5-year plan, but that's going out from FY21 as the first year. But if you go to page 8, that gives you a summary of the past 6 years of CIP spending. So it's the total for technology, the total for facilities, total for transportation, and grand total.
Perfect.
That helpful?
Yep, just what I was looking for. Thank you.
You bet.
And I think, not to sound like constantly clanging the same bell, but the facilities department at least has never fully capitalized, to use the term, on the 2% DOE recommendation. We've never received the full recommended amount for any year. And this year, we're probably coming closer than any other year. In many years, we have deferred our capital budget in favor of other big capital expenses. And I think specifically about the one-to-one computing year, where we had to make a large capital expense so that the students could have devices. And so we scaled back our ask. And what I would say to that is, just like you would do in your home, you can certainly put off replacing a roof on your home for one more year or 2 years or whatever. But the moment your roof starts to leak, you will have additional expenses. And in the construction environment right now, if you put off something for 1 year, you could probably plan on a 5 or 6% increase in cost the following year. And that is notwithstanding our current environmental economic downturn because of the virus. But ask any general contractor and they will tell you they cannot find help. And so the demand is high and the supply is low. And so the cost is going to be high. And I don't believe everything is going to come to a screeching halt on construction because there's so much that's in process that has to be finished. I think if anything, it's going to be even more of a struggle to get good help because of people's health and well-being. So I think the costs are going to remain high in construction through this. And so the longer we defer, the more it will cost the taxpayers.
Other questions?
I have a quick question. Kate, on the 5-year plan, what is covered in that long range planning line of 150,000?
Which 5-year plan? Are you looking at the capital budget?
Yes. It looks like it's a new line item for this year.
Yeah, actually, long range planning is exactly what we were talking about earlier. Sorry, I wasn't following you. That is the place where you would put funding for the lead up to and the planning for a construction project. So what's in there right now is $100,000 for this year. The 150 is this year and next year's projected. And that's the number that I think would change drastically if we move forward with the building steering committee's recommendation that we actually engage with an architect and a design firm and start to build the process of finding a site and so forth for that K2 building. So the $100,000 that's there now was a sort of a placeholder. It was based on some of the spending that we had prior to the Wentworth project, but it was only a portion of what was required to get that going.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Todd, I would just like to add that good learning is happening in Scarborough, and we appreciate you being very attentive to the buildings, not only construction-wise, but making sure that they're clean every day for our youngsters. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thanks.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. I couldn't do it without the staff that I have, that's for sure. The custodians they take great pride in their work, and so do the maintenance crew, and they're all willing to do whatever it takes, even if it's not necessarily perfectly within their job descriptions. They'll get after it. And I will say that the maintenance crew has come in on numerous occasions during the shutdown to help with various things. And I'm actually down to 3 right now. I had someone resign, so I'm looking for a 4th now. So, but they are just a great crew to work with as well. So I will pass along your good words.
They are amazing people. I know one of them was on his way to the Wayside Soup Kitchen to pick up some food for people today. So they'll do what it takes. This is one of those time for a break slides, Sandy.
Yes. Does that work for people? Take a break or move on?
I think a short break would be helpful.
Okay.
All right.
Do for 10 minutes. Come back at what? Just before 3 o'clock?
That sounds
Yeah, just
Okay.
2 minutes of 3.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Kate, you're still on share screen.
Thank you.
Okay, just checking in to see if everybody's back. Just wait for Kate. I think she should be coming back any minute. Hey, Kate,
As long as you don't mind me chewing.
as long as you share.
This is a very snacky time in this new life that I'm leading. I'm way too close to my kitchen.
Okay. Do we have another slide coming up or?
Here we go. You know, I'm not entirely sure which one of us is going to speak to this slide.
Well,
It almost looks like we should have made Monique do it. It speaks to a lot of the things that she was talking about in her section. I'll just start off by saying that central office is comprised of the school board, the superintendent's office, and the business office. That's our cost center, and it's referred to as system administration in the budget categories that the voters look at. And it's our job to support and I should say direct, but in a very collaborative way, direct the operations of our school district. And to keep things in alignment K-12, to keep our eyes on the big picture and the mission of the district. And so this slide is talking about the goals that we've set as a district, teaching and learning goals district-wide for the current school year, 2019-2020 school year. And as Monique spoke to the other day, we're working very hard on our use of data for our school leaders and our staff, making sure that we're relying on student data to inform both our instructional practices and the decisions that we make about how to use our resources. So that's what this slide is about. These are actually the 3 goals that were selected by the district for our CNA process. CNA stands for, help me Diane, Comprehensive Needs Assessment.
Very good, Kate.
Yeah, we used to think that it was certified nursing assistant, but our acronyms bounced off each other somewhere along the road there. And so in the budget book, you'll see that basically what we're saying is that the central office exists to support the rest of the district and to help guide our programming in a strategic way. There is a return on investment here. Let's see. Oh, I haven't got there yet. See, I don't know my own slides. So this is our learning goals, teaching and learning goals. Our operations goal reverts back to what we were just talking about with Todd and with Nick and with all of you. We all know that the big worry and wonder and the big prize in the distance is some kind of a response to our needs for student space and appropriate educational space for our students.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that those are the biggest drivers for all of the work that we do.
Return on investments. This is so cool because this is my investment that you all got behind, and I was so pleasantly surprised that the rest of the district and the community saw the value in this position. It did take us a while to fill that position. We were able to find the right person in February, or actually we found her in January, and she came on board in February, just in time pretty much to learn about 3 or 4 things in the office and then go home because we were having a pandemic and we were all leaving the office. So I think you've all read or heard a little bit about Maria. She's amazing, and she comes to us with so many great ideas and so many great resources in her toolkit And she's already helping with reaching out to staff and being super supportive in this crazy time. And there's no changes or investments that are specific to the central office budget. So this slide is just saying that it would, the budget would allow us to continue to maintain and support the programs and services across K-12 that are reflected in the other budgets. And our long-range vision for continuous improvement, I've got C exhibits in here, and exhibits is one of our little linked documents that's full of all kinds of juicy and exciting things that people can read. But essentially keeping our eyes on the strategic mission of the district.
Any questions for Kate? Let's go to the next slide.
So that's adult education, and I will also speak to that. And so we have a really robust adult education program, and we work very closely with other partners in surrounding communities to provide opportunities for adults in the areas of academics, vocational, career prep. And there are a couple of big highlights that folks should know about in regards to adult education. First off is we have a very robust certified nursing assistant program, the other CNA that Kate spoke about a minute ago. And we work closely with local nursing facilities to give those folks that on-the-job training. We also have a certified residential medication aid program, medical billing, pharmacy techs, phlebotomy techs. One of the big growth areas this year has been our English language learning program. I think heard yesterday from Allison that we have an increasingly growing number of English language learners as students in our schools that we're providing services for. And lots of those families are also reaching out to adult education. And so some of our adult education staff are actually offering some of those services right at, say, for example, the new Avista housing development that's up near Dunstan Corner. And so we're really bringing those programs to people where they need it. We're also offering college and career counseling. They have online career assessments, credit recovery opportunities, and high school diploma. Although I think, that's a place where we probably do less of than in the past. And then just a multitude of enrichment classes. One really exciting thing is that, as I mentioned, we work with regional partners. It's the group is called The Hub, and The Hub has just announced a new partnership with Southern Maine Community College, and they are going to be giving physical space over for some adult education programming to happen right on the SMCC campus so that we can bridge that gap, which for some students for whom, school doesn't, just come as a natural, confident fit for, that they can have that transition from adult ed support to becoming, community college attendees right on the same site. So we're super excited about that.
That is such a cool thing. That's been a long time coming. And what's great about that, if you're not really figuring this out in your head, that adult ed is free, pretty much. And the services that they'll provide are either low cost or free services to a student who might be coming into SMCC with a need to do what we would call a remedial math program or a remedial reading and writing program. Those students can take an adult ed course and get some placement assistance. They're going to get assistance with all kinds of things from adult ed, and then move forward into their SMCC career without having to have that be part of their tuition package. So it's pretty cool.
Very exciting.
I also wanted to mention that for those who are not following along in the book, the adult ed program and the school nutrition program are different funds from what we've been looking at so far. The voters in Scarborough and across the state in our communities vote on the K-12 education program. So that's what goes to referendum, and that's what you see a lot of detail about out in the community. Adult education, some districts have adult ed, some don't, and we all have different models for it. But it's considered a separate fund, as is school nutrition. And our adult ed program, we've been lucky to have a really awesome director there who is super dynamic and out in the community all day long trying to figure out what people need and making connections and just working so hard on behalf of the adults in our region. Shout out to Joan, and Joan's getting ready to retire. We're trying to find some chains and shackles to keep her on board, but she may be ready to go party.
Yeah. And then school nutrition is next, and I'll also provide you with the overview of our school nutrition program. And so again, we are so blessed to have such a strong school nutrition program. We have unbelievable staff. During the last school year, we served almost 200,000 meals to students here on site, and over 30,000 breakfast meals, which accounted for an 18% increase over the prior year. And that really has been expanded with our bus schedules. For those of you who aren't aware, currently 12.7% of our students receive free or reduced lunch under the USDA program. And the school nutrition partners with community services. And we also make sure in that way that students who are attending our summer programs are also provided breakfast and lunch. We're a summer feeding program site. And so basically that means that we can provide breakfast and lunch to any person under the age of 18 who shows up at one of our sites. And so we're really filling a need. And as I've said already previously, we're also working to continue to fill that need during this time of distance learning.
I can't say enough about our food service staff right now. Like we were saying before about our custodians and maintenance and bus drivers, we've got folks who are in the kitchens right now cooking hot meals that community members can pick up to feed their families. And they've heard some kind of harrowing stories in the past couple of weeks, and they received a lot of gratitude from those that they're serving. And we're really grateful to them for providing that service. And we're also really grateful to the community because we have just had a huge outpouring of funding for a backpack program. We were up to $5,000 last time I posted a count in a couple of weeks of people giving donations, $50, $100 at a time. And they're still pouring in, and I just haven't had time to slow down and count them. So big gratitude to our community for stepping up to help folks as well.
Yeah, and I would also add, as we're talking about that, if there are people listening who are beginning to experience some food insecurity, and we can lend a hand here in the community to help you out, we do have, you can call 730-4700, which is the food service line, or we also have a new email that's up and running. It's food@scarboroughschools.org. And the person on the other side of either that email or that phone will make sure that that folks are being provided for.
I have to say, if I can just interrupt, because I've been a witness to the food service team. They're there daily. And this morning I had to go into the schools to get a variety of things for a variety of people. And when I arrived, the Cisco truck was backed up to Wentworth, getting ready to unload. Of course, he was there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and no one arrives until 7. So I was able to let him in. And when I let him into the kitchen, I had to open the coolers, and in the coolers are dozens of donated Hannaford hams for the Easter holiday weekend. And one of the people, staff members, Ty from the kitchen, has baked all these apple pies, and they're going home to these families for the Easter weekend. And I just have to say, I was really amazed at not just the quantity of food, but the quality of the looks of what they're preparing is not just cobbled together, thrown in a box. It's really made with a lot of thought and care. So Ann Legage and Patty and Ty are the three I've seen at that kitchen, and they are just really going after it in all the right ways. So I'm just impressed.
Thanks, Todd. Can you move to the next slide, Kate? So, you know, as we've talked about, the backpack program continues to expand. They've received a lot of support from Project Grace, as well as some of those very kind donations that Kate spoke about. I know that most recently they also received a grant from Full Plates, Full Potential, and are constantly looking for other sources. One of the examples is the Community Thanksgiving Dinner. That's a project that School Nutrition puts on. It was another huge success this year. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to see the community coming together. The other thing that I would add that's not on these slides is that if you recall, the nutrition program really shifted up what they have been offering at the high school this year. And so they decided to back out of the USDA program and take care of that locally. And they, you know, we don't have the numbers here, but I think that we could certainly get them for you. But I think that revenue is definitely up. Kids are eating and really taking to the stations and so on that they have set up. I would also add that a lot of efforts have been made to reduce our carbon footprint and make sure that we're using silverware, increasing our recycling and composting efforts, and doing farm to school and local purchasing to the extent that we're able to. I know that the Ecos Club at the high school of students and even those at the middle school really were echoing that and trying to help get that messaging out there. The other shout out that I would give would be to Peter Esposito, who is our food service director. And I think Allison mentioned this in her piece yesterday. He actually is teaching a class to some of our students on a daily basis. I think Allison gave us that little vignette about the students who were asked to make pancakes and the one that had created the cake. So Peter definitely has this give back attitude and is totally committed to increasing that culinary capacity with our students as well. So we're very blessed.
Absolutely. Diane, on page 61 of the budget book, there's a pretty good write-up about the high school program.
Perfect.
And what we've been able to add in there, and there's a few numbers included there. So if folks are looking for more info on that, they might want to take a peek there.
Excellent. Thank you.
Questions, wonderings?
I have a question. I'm just wondering if we have enough data to find out how things have been working out since we dropped out of the federal program. And I know that you said that we could go back in at any time, and because we're not really getting the revenue, does it make sense to think about that? Or because it's somewhat short term, the situation we're in, if that's short-sighted or doesn't make sense?
I think we actually left the USDA program officially when the school board voted last May. And so of course, May and a couple of weeks in June wasn't really enough time to make a decision. But we have been in that same situation and building the high school sales from the beginning of school this year till we stopped school last day of school in mid-March. And all signs are showing that it's actually very, very effective, and that we're actually making more money by not taking the USDA's reimbursement and allowing us to have a little bit more flexibility about what we're selling and what offerings we can provide. I'm not sure, Alicia, whether we have sufficient data to make a permanent decision, if we even need to do that, because as you said, we can go in and out as we wish. But I think it's something that, is on a Peter's and my radar to want to report back out on that. So we're working on some, we're in third quarter right now, at the end of the third quarter. So we could provide some numbers to Finance Committee for that.
Well, does it make sense to go back in it, or is that too difficult while we're in the pandemic and we're just, I mean, would they fund for the?
So in regards to the pandemic, we're actually putting a proposal together right now. I think we have a meeting on that on Friday, if I saw my calendar, in regards to applying for some stimulus funds. They've relaxed the regulations in regards to how schools can receive give back funds during this time. The original regulations stated that you had to have 50% or more for your reduced lunch, and they've now completely wiped that away. And so we're in the process of filing an application to recoup some funds.
As far as going back into the program is concerned, I don't think that it's necessary as a response to the school closure, because the operation that we're doing right now is not a school meal program. Right. As of today, what we're doing is our backpack program. Right. But once we have this conversation on Friday with the guidance from the Department of Education, what we would be running would be similar to a summer program, similar to the summer rec, where we're providing meals and we're allowed to claim and get reimbursed for a portion of those meals. But it wouldn't matter that the high school wasn't part of the regular school lunch program, because that wouldn't be what we were doing. Now, when we get back into school, depending on when that is, that would be a conversation that we could have. But if we're back in school, then I think we're actually going to generate more revenue by having the product that the kids want and having the sales figures that we're used to having because of what we're able to sell.
Thank you for clarifying that for me and for giving me the additional information about Friday.
You're welcome. Yeah, and it is
posted.
It's crazy confusing, and that's Peter reported that he had a good webinar about it, and we're all sort of trying to figure this out as we go along. So we're going to learn from him on Friday.
Yeah, he's a strong advocate. We're very fortunate to have him.
Other questions? Okay, I think we are pretty much at the talking points. I would remind the public that tomorrow night, Wednesday, town manager and myself, the superintendent, will be jointly presenting the budget to the council and to the school committee. And then on Thursday night, I will be doing a more in-depth presentation to the public and to the school committee as well.
So this, I don't know if this is live here, but we had a Google Doc linked in. This is actually from last year when we did this workshop. And we spent some time brainstorming at the end of these workshops, some ideas about what the board's takeaways were in terms of really important pieces of information that the community might need to know and that might help the community be more understanding of and supportive of the school budget. So when I linked this in, I found that there was some pretty interesting ideas that we had last year that seemed like they probably were still kind of current. So on the second page of this, I left those items there just as a point of reference. And I've left some space here, and I am more than happy to capture notes if we want to start talking about what the communication piece is, right? Because the next things we'll be doing moving forward is trying to reach out to the community and help them understand what's in the budget and why they should support it.
I can start if you want, Kate.
Yes.
I think one of the most important things is, and I think we did a pretty good job with this last year, but again, it's the same for this year, is that a lot of the new expenditures are a direct result of an increase in our student enrollment and an increase in student needs. And I think that's really important to get across. We can't just open our doors in the fall and have everything be the same as as it was in the spring for the same amount of money.
Right, and I think one of the things we said last year was that there was an impact of growth in the community on all kinds of services and certainly on the schools. That's been a recurring theme for the last 2 years. And the student needs piece is important. So if you take the biggest pieces of our budget above and beyond just what we would call level services, they are responsive to students with specific needs and needs for specialized programming and enrollment growth.
Mm-hmm. So maybe that's actually two different points then, that some expenditures are a direct result of the increase in student enrollment and some expenditures are a direct result of the increase in student need. I mean, those are related too, right? But
yeah. And I would say together, these drivers represent the bulk of new investment or something like that.
I think the other piece is the K through 8 mathematics curriculum, which would allow us to have online resources, and also the middle school whole language, world language curriculum component, which I think was just under 30,000.
I thought Monique had said that we are not going to have online resources.
I think what she was explaining was that our current Math and Focus program uses Flash for the online component of the book.
Right.
And Flash is sunsetting. And so that means it's no longer going to be available. And so unless we do this math curriculum upgrade, and get a more recent copyright of Math in Focus, there would not be an online component. So if we want there to be a continued online component, then we need to upgrade our math curriculum.
Okay, that's not how I understood what she was saying.
Okay,
Well, thank you.
you're welcome.
I think that is correct. I think that with the upgrade, we will be able to have those online components.
Yes.
Without it, we would not.
Right.
Okay.
The middle school world language might resonate with our community because it's been such a long process. I think Monique spoke to it yesterday when she was saying that we used to have world language programming at Wentworth all the way up to the high school. And then during the last recession, we lost the Wentworth level and we really drastically reduced the middle school level. And we're only just now getting back to the point where kids are coming out of the middle school at a higher level and able to be more advanced when they get to high school.
The world language curriculum, they were talking about like vertical
Alignment with,
alignment. Is that so? Would that include the new programs that they have at Wentworth? So would that be vertical from Wentworth all the way through the high school? Because that might be a good.
Yeah, so Nikki Vafiadis definitely does do professional development and planning with middle school and high school, so that they're really trying to make sure that they're closely aligned in what they're doing so that they're helping kids to step up as they go through.
Yeah, so I don't know if that you could put into the vertical alignment with the new curriculum will go from Wentworth all the way through the middle school until the high school.
high school. Yay, autocorrect. I'm gonna say, Hillary, like rebuilding programming. Recession years or something. Now that we're talking about having a new recession, then we can start throwing that word out there. Anybody remember 2009, 2010?
Yeah. So I also think that, this whole process speaks to the interconnectedness between the town budget and the school budget. I know Mike Legage spoke to some of that yesterday in his example about the fields. And so, I'm not sure how you might want to word that, but I think that, that is an important designation for us, to make sure that people understand it's not either or, that it's all related.
I think another message that is probably no surprise, but just shy of 80% of our budget goes towards the human resources. We're a people organization, and that's where I think 79.5% to 80% of our cost goes to.
And I don't know if, this probably isn't going to be relevant by the time we're talking about this, hopefully, but I do want to reiterate that the budget numbers we've used are based on the tentative agreement that we have for the teacher's contract. And so it is, as of now, at accurate numbers. We're not using numbers from last year or guessing.
Tentative agreement on.
Sorry, that's just for the teacher salary portion of the human resources. I just obviously wanted to make that clear.
related to that, I'm sure the answer to this is yes, but in that 79.5% of that chunk of money, there's a window for upcoming negotiations as well, right? And expected increases.
We do have one open, well, we have two open collective bargaining agreements, one being the teachers, which we hope is on the brink of being settled, and then the other is the education support staff. And so, as Sandy was saying earlier, that between those two groups, those two bargaining units are our largest.
Yeah.
And they represent, what did we say, like 80% of our staff falls into one of those two bargaining units. If I get that number right, Diane, I can't remember.
Yeah, sorry, it's just over 80% of our staff are either teachers or support staff.
So just to clarify that these numbers work in what is expected to be passed, the tentative agreement for the teachers, but also some portion of this year, God willing, will have a new contract for our ed techs as well, and thus a different rate of pay.
Right. I don't know how to say it, Nick. Estimates are also included for education staff bargaining unit, which will be negotiating for 7/1/2020. And then we said 80% plus of our staff belong to one, two. How's that?
Perfect.
April has had her hand up, as has Kristen.
No worries. So my talking point would be one that we frequently get from the community, which is about efficiencies. And it's always good for us to highlight when we have a retirement and we reallocate that person's, financial contributions to another department, or if we are able to run a program in an innovative way. Those kind of highlights show the community that we don't just, ask for new things on top of new things, that we're always looking for ways to incorporate those by creating efficiencies. I know at Wentworth,
that's a good one.
like all of their new investments were coming at a reduced cost because of staff that they were not going to fill. Like those kind of things, I think are good talking points too.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we run into, that I've heard in the past, is that level services, that label that we put on the sort of base budget proposal, some folks will perceive that as, oh, you're just not even looking at the budget. You're just taking what you have this year and maybe you're adding 2% or 5% or something, and you're just calling it good. Where what we're really doing is going line by line and saying to each principal and each department head, hey, Allison, if you need X dollars more for this thing, is there something in your budget that you can cut back on? And, every last one of the people that we sat with did something of that sort. There were plenty of trading going on. So I'll call it like reductions in regular operations.
And I'll just jump in too, Kate. I think we've done a pretty good job of disabusing people of the notion that a level services budget is a 0% increase, but you might want to keep
put that in there somewhere.
That in there somewhere, just so that people still have an understanding of that.
Yeah. How about April's favorite topic of the increase on the tax school budget is not the increase on the tax rate? Except, I don't know, maybe it kind of is this year.
Kristen, I think you had your hand up before I did. You're on mute.
I would think we should probably address the primary schools. They, just in terms of percentage, look like a large increase, which they have real needs there. And I think we need to explain those, why the request for support staff, the request for the behavior specialist, and all the things that sort of go into it, and that those asks are based largely on teacher requests and teacher feedback. At the budget meetings at the primary schools, it was so loud and clear that they have huge staff needs in those buildings. And I think it's important that people know where that request comes from.
It's a good point, Kristen, because you're right. They were very eloquent.
Yes.
And I can't spell. That's even better.
And some of the data that the primary principals included in the budget book is great stuff. If we can find a way to share that, just the behavior referrals that they've had, and the amount of time that goes into the IEPs and 504 plans.
I'll just say use data from primary section budget book to work assessment. Because you're right, there's some really good information in there. And I didn't really say it when we started taking these notes, but I'm sure that, the handoff is kind of to both finance and communications committees once we get this first reading out. So if there's material that you guys want to put out there that we can, pull together more information and make that be supportive of that communication effort, that'd be good to know.
I was just gonna maybe expand on April's point to say like efficiencies and maybe innovations or something. And I think there's two things I want to call out there. Some of the efficiencies that Todd talked about, just like the day-to-day efficiencies and little things like light bulbs that make a, over the scope of all of our schools could make a big impact. And then the energy consortium that we're entering into.
Oh, yeah.
But also around sort of innovation or revenue. Obviously, I think everyone wants to see the numbers with the school nutrition program, but I think that was a step that we took for a multitude of reasons, one of which was we saw it as an opportunity to increase revenue. And so if that truly is the case that we are doing that, I think we want to call that out.
Make these bullets under the efficiencies topic. How about efficiencies and innovation? Like that.
Sounds good.
Oh,
Look, guys, I put my hand up. I think that along with what Kristen was saying in terms of trying to explain some of the increased needs at the primary level, some of those needs are directly related to why we also need a new school at the primary level. So I think that maybe understanding the space and safety constraints at our current sites will go a long way in helping people understand the CIP ask for the continuation of the building steering committee work.
Right. I would say new facilities, new A2 facilities to address both space and what would you call it, like inadequate program space, or we have some language floating around here. It's not just that there's not enough room, but that the room isn't
right. Like there's limited programmatic space and common areas. Like Anne Lovejoy keeps saying, you can add as many modular classrooms as you want to 8 corners, but it doesn't give the kids somewhere to eat lunch or have gym class or library or music and art. But also, like, a little bit related to what Todd was saying, some of the spaces that used to be classroom spaces have, just because of changing programmatic needs, have had to be converted into different types of spaces. So we don't, anyway, I could go on and on about it, as you guys know.
Yeah, well, I think the topic is there.
Understanding
like, how do we, right. So does our understanding of why we need more human resources at K2 also extend to understanding why the space resources, the facilities resources are inadequate?
Is this the forum that we could use to talk about some of last year's investments and how they've paid off?
We do that as part of the communications committee. We talk about that, and then obviously, since I'm on finance, that carries over. And I tend to think that's a separate conversation, just because we need to really look at last year's budget and kind of decide what we want to highlight. But that's just my thinking on that.
Yeah, and I only ask because every time we ask for new investments, I tend to hear people saying, well, we never heard what happened last year with the money that we invested. So even if it's separate, if we could at some point, go back and look at the investments we made and report back on them, it might be helpful.
I do think that's important. I think that's important, Kristen, and I think it's the reason why we sort of focus on those things when we're doing these workshops or when we're doing the putting things in the budget book. It's like, oh, you gave us this position. What happened? Was it great? How did it work out for you? And we want to be able to celebrate that for sure. And I'll just put a note here that talks about how do we articulate that, what's the communication vehicle for that piece? Because you're right. It's like, well, I gave you all this money last year. What'd you do with that?
And I think
that $100 investment at Wentworth is a perfect example.
Right. It's a great story.
Each of the teachers got that. Yeah. Each of the teachers got that discretionary spending, and we heard from so many people how appreciative they were.
I think
it was such a small ask.
Typically we try to, or at least as a communications committee, we have tried in the past to highlight return on investments, like right around budget season. But I'm wondering if it might be something that we could instead work into like either monthly or bi-monthly meetings to hear stories about, you know, like we could have asked for Kelly to come in or a teacher to come in and talk about that $100 per teacher investment at Wentworth, and instead of waiting, because what happens is when we try to do like communication on return on investments, we end up getting bogged down by all of the new things that we need to communicate with the upcoming budget, and it kind of falls to the, you know, to the side for us.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hillary.
So just doing a time check here. We are about 5 minutes over in this section, although the last section is really just to discuss next steps. So I think we're probably okay, but just wanting to remind us. Doing my job as the timekeeper.
Anybody else want to throw a thought out there? These are all good stuff. I'm going to, at the risk of making people dizzy, I'm going to scroll up to the second page here. This is some of the stuff from last year. Items are still in motion and adjustments are being made. Actually, we were talking about that a little bit earlier, that one of the worries I think I heard in terms of the modular buildings and, you know, the staffing requests last year was, well, how do you know that you're going to have that enrollment increase? How do you know that you're going to have these needs? And are you just going to spend the money willy-nilly and we really don't care? And so I think there's a place for some kind of messaging about how we're going to be adjusting these asks as we get better information. Something about showing statistics around the enrollment projections. I'm not going to say anything about that. Changes in student needs and complexity of their needs. This is like an echo, guys. Importance of maintaining the physical plant. Importance of special services request. This is a nice point that we made, was that the early intervention investment. This goes to your point about the K2s, Kristen, that, you know, we're investing a lot of money at that K2 level for the second year in a row, but the K2 level is the jumping off point for all of these students, and that the value of that early intervention, if we can put some money towards kids as they're coming in the door, then we're much less likely to have to throw a lot of money at those same kids as they move up through the grades. And so your return on investment at the K2 level is really extraordinary. If you can start early and support kids as they're just coming in our doors, it really does make a big difference. Minimum receivers we talked about last week. That was exciting. And the tax rate is not the school ask. This is last year's number, by the way. When we had first reading last year, it was 5.79%. And this year, our ask is 5.2%. So our first reading this year is actually a little bit lower than what we were looking at last year.
The other piece that I would add, since we have been meeting this afternoon, is that it's been reported that the governor is going to be changing the June election to July. And Tom Hall has already sent something out to us towards
Oh.
that regard. So I think we need to be prepared for a shift in process.
Oh my goodness. So if it's after the 1st of July, I'm sure Tom will have a thing or two to say about that, but the 1st of July is our start of our fiscal year. So we'll have to figure out what that means in terms of not having a budget vote.
Correct.
Unless we have our budget referendum in June and don't put it with the primary, that would add an expenditure to the town to run in a separate election, and it might not be safe. I mean, the point of moving it out is to not have people gathering in polling places, right?
Yeah, no, it looks like they're already recommending that we shift.
I'll just make a little note here. In referendum changed to July. What does it mean? That could be a little complex in explaining to the public, what does it mean? You know, if you don't have a budget to start the beginning of the year. We've certainly been there before. We've had referenda that didn't pass, and we've gone past July 1st, and we all survived. But it does make it more complicated.
No, I would agree. The guidance that I've seen to date has been that if this was a decision, this was before this was even being discussed, but the assumption was that you would work under your last year's budget in the same way that we would if we wouldn't have had a budget approved. But it certainly will complicate things.
What have we done in years past when the budget hasn't been approved until much later? Do you just work on the previous year's budget?
There's a couple of things that apply to that. There's statute, and then there's a town charter. Once the town manager has presented a budget for FY21, then the town council has a 60-day period in which to finalize that, take a vote on it, and then they have to send the school portion to the voters. There's, depending on where you are in the process, you can either go with your current year budget and just keep going the same, taking the same approach, or you can use the town manager's budget. In either case, you have a little bit of a problem because you don't really know where you're going to land in the end. You can't spend more money than what is authorized for you. So your problem would be that even though you don't have a new budget, you do have a new contract year. And so come September, our teacher group, for example, is going to be getting their steps and their COLA on the assumption that we're moving forward with this new contract. Same thing for all of your other staff. So you can't then just assume that everything is business as usual, because you're going to need to be able to support those higher salaries with a smaller budget than what you needed to really accomplish that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you really, if you're in that situation, you're really in kind of a holding pattern, and you're really kind of doing a lot of spending curtailment on anything discretionary until you get some clarity on where you're going to land. You're really just focusing on salaries and benefits and the bare essentials.
Yep.
Well, one of the I was a little late to raise my hand, but I did have one thing I wanted to add. The other thing that might be challenging to communicate to the public is that this is actually, so Kate was just talking about the teacher salaries and the tentative agreement we have right now. This coming year, when we go through those steps and we go through the COLA, is actually year 2 of the contract and not year 1, which is awkward because it's taken us so long to come to the resolution with the contract. But that's something that could be interesting to try and communicate if anyone asks about it, because when they look at the new contract, we're actually looking at the second year of that contract. The first year is going to be mostly retroactive, assuming that the ratification goes through.
Anything else? Sandy?
Can't think of anything. I think that's really good work.
So this document is a shared doc, and I'm not sure where it actually lives. I don't know where its home base is, but what we can do is we can put it into the, what do you think, the school board shared folder?
There's a FY21 budget folder in the finance committee portion of the BOE share drive. So yeah, if you could put it in there, that'd be great.
We'll put a copy of this in there, and that way folks can communications get access to that too, or you guys are communications, some of you. So. Okay.
Yeah. We all have access to that, Kate.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so to wrap these things up, so reviewing our next steps, we have our budget calendar that Kate so nicely revised for us, and it seems as though we may have another revision coming, so stay tuned on that.
And we've got a couple of things going on here. Let's see, this one I think is that's the schmancy colored one that we have with the town.
Right.
And yeah, I think as soon as you PDF something, you gotta go back and change it. And then this is a list of the meetings that are upcoming.
Yeah.
In the near future. But we did also have, I think, some things on the agenda about, sorry, I'm hopping around here, about Finance Committee has their first meeting scheduled for the 27th to start figuring stuff out. And then a couple notes about what the Communications Committee has thought about taking on. I think we can take neighborhood budget outreach off because I don't think we're going to be going out into the neighborhoods, but maybe neighborhood budget outreach is something different now. Maybe it's, you know, some webinars or gatherings, virtual gatherings. So interesting.
And also think about, like, are there social media posts or little snippets of videos that Communications Committee might want to put out there during this time where, you know, that's the limited outreach that we have.
I think the Facebook posts were very helpful in the past, right?
Mhm.
Where you had a little piece of information and
We have a calendar that we're gonna try and fill in. I mean, April can talk to this too, but we have a calendar that we're gonna try and fill in with what some of the things are that we'll do to try and communicate. A lot of them will be probably, or more of them will be social media this year than they were last year. But typically we hadn't started doing that until after second reading because we need to know what the numbers are.
need to know what you're talking about.
Yep. And for anybody interested, anybody who might be listening, our next Communication Committee meeting is Wednesday, April 14th at 1 p.m.
That's Tuesday.
You're right, that's Tuesday. Sorry, Tuesday, April 14th at 1 p.m. And then also, I just want to remind everybody that we have that question open Google Doc. So if you guys do have questions for the Finance Committee, things that you would like us to discuss or things that you'd like Kate to answer, you can just drop all of your questions into that one document, and that's a shared document. So we won't be redundant and we won't be sending a bunch of emails.
That's great.
I would imagine that would be a bit of an anchor for us as we get together on April 27th to just start figuring out what are the big wonders there. And, you know, I'm relying certainly on Finance Committee as the engine to pulling the train on our next steps.
All right. Anything else for today?
Oh, it says thank you.
Nice.
Thank you for putting all of this together. This was really helpful. A lot of work went into this process. Very much appreciated by everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Be well.
Right. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Do a roll vote.
Yes, please.
Ms. Bergen,
Yes.
Mrs. Giftos,
Yes.
Dr. Gill,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Layton,
Yes.
Mrs. Seither,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner. She's considering.
I said yes. You didn't hear me?
No.
Sorry.
Just thinking it over. I'm not really sure if I want to go home.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Oh.
Thank
Thank
guys.
you.
Have a good afternoon.